All right. Greetings. This is Hunter.
Hello.
I'm Edward. You've heard me on the podcast before. You've certainly heard him on the podcast by now. He and I are going to be here talking about these Cthulhu miniatures and basically the Cthulhu mythos in general, correct?
Yeah. All these miniatures were painted by WhiteMetalGames by our artists Tyler and Ryan.
And you'll see us consulting our notes every now and again. We are actually cheating. Shame on us.
Yeah.
But that's okay. So,
otherwise, we get a repeat of my how to build tree forts videos.
And if you've ever looked at the Cthulhu mythos, and we've just really kind of had a general first look, because neither of us are hugely experienced with the mythos.
We've both kind of had a exposure through osmosis for Cthulhu.
You've had a sort of general education, perhaps, yeah. But if any of you are much more familiar with it than us, then you know what a convoluted mythos it is. And therefore, keeping it all straight, you don't know your elder gods without a program. So we kind of got programmed back here. I've got my cheat notes. You can see how very, very convoluted that is with my...
What's that?
That is... Yeah, see, I'm maxing out the microphone right now.
Just load the shotgun over here.
There we go.
Just in case. But yeah, if we get anything wrong, it's because we don't actually know anything. We're actually fake geeks and posers and complete hack frauds.
I'm not a fake geek. I'm a 48th level geek. At least that's how I list myself at the end of my blog entries. But... So, getting started with these guys down here, of course, let's kind of go from this end over to that end, because we know who's waiting on that end.
Okay. So which end were you going to go on?
This end.
Oh, okay.
Starting way over here, we have the non-personified version of our King in Yellow.
No, that's basically the true form.
Well, his true form, correct. Yeah, we are finally actually seeing his final form. But So the King in Yellow, let me look at my thing, of course, is Hastur.
Yep, Hastur, who is not actually part of the Cthulhu mythos, at least not... He wasn't created by Lovecraft himself.
Actually was created originally by Ambrose Bierce.
Yes, who sort of got was adopted into the official lore because it was simply that good, from what I understand.
And later a story was done by Robert Chambers that was extremely good, who included the Hastur reference from Ambrose Bierce. And at that point, Mr. Lovecraft looks at it and goes, "Ooh, yeah, that's actually really good, and I'm going to use that like writers do."
Yeah.
And only in Lovecraft's case, he would straight up take something that somebody made and stick it in his story because he wanted to.
Was he alive back when Hastur was made?
He was, actually.
Okay.
In this case, yes, he was alive when Hastur was made, so that Mr. Chambers was back in his day, too.
Okay. Well, it's good enough for Star Wars to take characters other people have made and introduce them into the story.
Really?
Grand Admiral Thrawn.
Right, okay. But in his case, what is Mr. Hastur... Well, Hastur and Hastur also here in the middle in his human form.
Mm-hmm. The King in Yellow, what were some of his other names?
The King in Yellow... Actually, I don't think he's got really any other names. Not that I'm seeing here. Hastur was originally something of a herder god or a sort of field god who was adopted into the mythos by Lovecraft.
Interesting, because in my experience, he's always kind of been on the decadent side, sort of like the artsy, the powerful, the rich, the ones who can sort of indulge themselves.
I've got a webcomic that I see every now and again where you've got parents who are talking about how their kid, who is a little withdrawn, is going to be appearing in the play tonight, and the father needs to come to the school play tonight to see it. And of course, the kid is playing the King in Yellow and has this King in Yellow mask with that sigil on the front. And their lives are going really, really sideways in a decadent and perverse kind of way. And when he gets to the play that night, having been initiated in by his wife during the day, of course the principal is laughing to himself as he bars the school auditorium shut and starts pouring the gasoline around it to set the whole place ablaze while everybody's inside confronted with the elder sign or the yellow sign, when the king finally reveals his mask and drives everybody in the audience insane.
Yeah, fun fact, in-universe you can summon Hashtur by performing the play The King in Yellow.
Which they were doing as a school play in this little story.
Hashtur's actually been the starring villain in a few famous stories, some RPG stories that you see floating around the internet.
Right.
One of the most famous, of course, being Old Man Henderson, the man who won Call of Cthulhu.
The Man Henderson, the legend himself.
Yes.
Lawn gnomes you do not steal.
Even though he gave them away.
Even though he gave them away near the end. If you value really good humor and you're not really all that attached to your sanity anyway, go look up the saga of Old Man Henderson. Search for that when you look for him on Google. It will be an easy thing to find.
There are two parts to it. One from the perspective of the player who played Old Man Henderson and the player who kept getting killed by Old Man Henderson by accident.
Yeah. You've heard those kind of roleplay stories that just sort of take off and take a life of their own. Old Man Henderson is one of the elder RPG stories in this sense. Literally an elder one.
Yes.
So moving on, we have, and I want to get the name right, this is Shub-Niggurath here.
Yes.
Kind of put that out in the center for people to see.
The black goat of the forest with
1,000 young, or the Lord of the Wood. Also, the grandmother of Great Cthulhu by Yog Sothoth.
Yep.
Which I did not know until I did a little bit of research today. But I know that I will hear that every now and again. When I was watching a movie that was done for HBO a long time ago, this was called Cast a Deadly Spell. We've got this United States setting in the 1940s, 1950s, just after World War II, but magic is real, sorcery is real, and the planets are just about to align a very certain way. And when that happens, we know that Great Cthulhu here is, of course, going to be able to be summoned and brought into the world to destroy everything.
Yeah.
And Shub-Niggurath and Yog Sothoth, most of the family here, and they are pretty all interrelated, gets name-checked during the summoning ritual at the very end, but when David Warner has his hand on the Necronomicon, and he's bringing Cthulhu through the gate with a virgin sacrifice of his own daughter, by the way. So that's really perverse and unpleasant, but well done in a time that you wouldn't expect movies to be well done like this. Even with the practical effects, they really went all out. This was executive produced by Galen Hurd, who had a hand in Terminator 2, Alien Nation, all of those kinds of movies that followed. I believe she had a bit of an influence on The Abyss, if I'm right.
Hasn't Cthulhu and the Elder God mythos been showing up in a lot more mainstream titles these days?
Mainstream titles like movies?
Yeah.
Well, we've not had a real Cthulhu TV series, but there are more and more movies coming out where we've got, say, like The Color Out of Space, which you remember as The Curse. The Curse back in the day with Will Wheaton. In this case, it's going to be the actual The Color Out of Space, starring Nicolas Cage.
The one and only.
And those trailers are out there. You can probably find them on YouTube if you want to. Mm-hmm. This is going to be something interesting for folks. We've also got some other instances of the mythos showing up throughout movie history. I know that we've also got Reanimator, which I think is loosely based on Cthulhu mythos.
Mm-hmm. And don't forget Evil Dead, which has the Necronomicon appear in it.
It does. The Necronomicon's turned into a sort of supreme MacGuffin that weaves its way through so many different films and so many different horror stories.
The artifact of ultimate evil.
The artifact of ultimate evil. In the case of the Cast a Deadly Spell, it was serving as the stand-in for the Maltese Falcon. The thing that everybody is trying to get that the Private Eye has to get first. Of course, you've also got a movie that didn't get made. And this was going to be Del Toro doing this one. He was going to do In the Mountains of Madness.
And I would have paid good money to see that.
It was attached to have Tom Cruise star in it in this doomed expedition to Antarctica, where he kind of goes up into the mountains there, what mountains there are in Antarctica, going down and find Shoggoths in the cave networks and getting lost in it and finding all this old lore that, of course, sends him off the rails, because of course he does.
Yep.
It would have been a nice thing to see get made, and if I know Del Toro, he probably hasn't given up totally on the idea. It's just sort of waiting for the time to come around again for him to do it, like Cthulhu does.
Yes. Always waiting.
Always dreaming in Relia.
So, I've noticed in recent years, or just through casual observation, Warhammer seems to take quite a few notes out of the Elder God mythos for their own setting.
It does. Something else I learned today while I was actually doing my notes, and this would do with Azathoth, who is not featured here on the table. That's actually an expansion in Peterson Games. If you've been listening to the podcast, Shane and I did a review of that one.
We did do an Azathoth miniature.
We did. We did a review of it unpainted, me and Shane did on the podcast. And then we talked about it again later after Preston had painted it and then went off to a convention and left it here with us. Stunning work. I wish we actually had it to show here, but it's...
We've got it in the Flickr gallery. We can put some pictures up for you.
Absolutely, you can find it on the Flickr gallery. So, yeah, definitely we have Azathoth, but I only just learned recently that Azathoth is the chaos at the center of the galaxy, at the center of all things.
The blind idiot god. He has the most powerful being in the universe and has not the wit or the brain to use it.
Essentially the personification of Sagittarius A, the supermassive black hole at the center of our galaxy. And, of course, we also know what that is in Warhammer. That's our Maelstrom.
Yep, the Eye of Terror.
Ugh.
The Great Rift.
But, yeah, there is definitely that influence in Warhammer. You were mentioning something about the Chaos symbol in Warhammer as well.
Yes, so, while it's not Cthulhu, the 8-pointed star is actually lifted from Michael Moorcock's books. I forgot which one specifically.
Not the Elric books.
Just the personification of, like... Basically, Michael Moorcock did the law versus chaos axis as opposed to the good versus evil.
Okay.
And that was sort of borrowed from there in both D&D and Pathfinder, which was, of course... got it from D&D in the first place.
I was unaware of that axis.
At least I think that's what it is. I might be wrong there, but I do know for a fact the 8-pointed star of chaos is in fact from his books.
Okay. Well, let's actually get to the next one of these. Here we have, let's look here, this would be...
That is also a Cthulhu Mini.
Yeah, this is actually Cthulhu as well.
There's Cthulhu and there's like Dire Cthulhu.
Which I'm guessing that's Dire over there.
I think it might be the incarnation.
Yeah, that is Dire over there.
As opposed to like a scion. A scion instead.
Okay. Can you go into that a little bit? Because I'm unfamiliar with that.
So there's like... Okay, I may be bullshitting here, but the star spawn of Cthulhu is sort of like a child or like a lesser, like something that Cthulhu could control through himself.
An avatar of himself.
Essentially, yes. A smaller, lesser image of himself that is controlled.
So would this actually be incarnated into the universe as opposed to locked outside of it?
Yes, and I believe that might be what had a fishing boat sailed right into Cthulhu in that one book, which explained why he went down so easily.
This would actually be the Call of Cthulhu you're referring to.
I believe so. Again, I haven't read it. This is just osmosis.
In the investigations of the fellow making all of these logs in the Call of Cthulhu, and this was written very much in the style of the adventurer or the investigator, in this case, keeping a diary of his investigations, letting you know what he's finding as he writes it down, very much in that whole Mary Shelley Frankenstein kind of way. And near the end, he's talking about being on the boat that they've chartered out to this island that only appears every now and again. He's gone out there with a crew, and they've gone up through this almost non-Euclidean city that the very sight of is grating on everybody's nerves. And of course, the stars and the planets have lined up just right, so things are just about to happen. The doors, great doors at the top of a stairway, and the stairs are easily 20 feet tall for each step. They're kind of climbing up these stairs like a mountain. And when they get there, these doors finally fling themselves open, and a great miasma of non-physical form, but at the same time, this guy comes out of that, and of course, just the presence of him and the vapor all around them kills most of the people who climb the mountain instantly dead. And of course, our main character has to flee all the way back down the mountain, and does a creditable job of it, gets away just in time. I believe his hair goes white in the process, and he's...
from the shock.
Yeah. And he gets aboard the boat, has to fight with the conductor of the boat who got him out here to start with, because the conductor, Mr. Conductor, is totally down with Mr. Cthulhu up there on the mountain, coming down at them, incarnating himself into the world as they flee, overcomes this boat pilot and turns the boat around as though to flee, but the thing is already in the water and starting to wade out from the island to get him. So he's like, okay, if I've got no escape, I'm going to plow this boat right through him, turns the boat around and sets course straight for the fellow, which he goes straight through, because he's physical, but at the same time not physical. So he sort of tears apart with this wet, ripping, stinky sound. Of course, sounds can smell bad, too, in these stories, because we've got a lot of, synesthesia happening along with the madness. And after that happens, he kind of sets out to sea to hopefully find civilization again, and loses conscience. They find him on the boat, gibbering and half insane the entire time till he comes back to himself.
I guess he got off lucky.
And so, yeah, this fellow is permeable and killable, and actually it's somewhat incarnatable in the world. So less about someone using the Necronomicon to summon him properly. This was somebody who was like just inside the gate at the top of the mountain that shows up every time the constellations are right.
One thing I noticed, or at least I'd seen a scene from, was Cthulhu even goes back to appear as early as the animated Ghostbusters series in a special episode.
That sounds about right. I don't remember it, but it sounds like something that J.M. Straczynski would do. And for those of you not familiar with J.M. Straczynski, that was the fellow who did the He-Man cartoon before he did Ghostbusters, but later still, in the 90s, was responsible for Babylon 5. He was the head writer of Ghostbusters on the strength of his work on He-Man. They basically came to him and said, how would you like an entire animated series all to yourself for your head writer? And he's like, yeah, okay, sure, I can do that. All right, we need a 72-episode order. Yeah, I can do that. But he pulled it off and did rather well with it. It was a favorite of mine in the 1980s. Excuse me, early 90s.
So we haven't talked about this guy yet, I don't think. This is...
We have not.
This is Yog Sothoth. I think.
Yog Sothoth, let me look once more. Yog Sothoth. The Gate, the Key, and the Guardian of the Gate. The Grand Sire of Cthulhu by Shub-Niggurath here.
And quite possibly the most benevolent, as far as that, as long as we can stretch the definition out.
Benevolence from a certain point of view, if we want to use the Star Wars term for it.
The least malicious of the elder gods.
Typically, this is the one that cultists who are trying to bring this one about are trying to supplicate themselves to in order to gain knowledge, or in this case, forbidden knowledge. And knowledge will be granted unto these people, though the question will always be asked, are you sure? And of course, when they give them that knowledge, it's often way, way too much for the fellow to bear, and insanity, of course, occurs. And that's basically Yog Sothoth as far as I'm aware of.
So what I'm seeing is these two schmucks here, Nyarlathotep, the trickster, and the one who basically finds ways to screw around with humanity, and this infinite being of knowledge. The two of them kind of make up the concept of the elder god Tzeentch in the Warhammer setting. Tzeentch is the chaos god of hope, change, fate, and is known as the changer of ways.
Okay.
And magic, basically just raw magic and knowledge.
All right.
He reveals secrets to his followers, and those who cannot bear them, usually intentionally, become chaos spawn under him.
This is the one that your magic user in the Scooby gang was worshipping.
I don't know for certain. Most likely, I think the
I think your Velma was going for Tzeentch. Yes.
Possibly, I don't know. The thing is that the Chaos Warbands in Warhammer sometimes just worship chaos as they observe it. They don't understand the separation of the gods, and sort of worship it as like a singular entity, but it all gets funneled back to the warp anyway.
Yeah, Nyarlathotep, unlike the grantor of knowledge and the somewhat benevolent one, he's pretty much your Loki of the bunch.
Oh, absolutely.
Your Deceiver, likes to walk around in human form, very much shows up as a supplicant to many of the cults out there.
Mm-hmm.
A causer of mischief.
Mm-hmm. He won't ask if you want to know. He'll just be like, look at this! And you'll go insane.
Definitely acts as the will of the rest of these elder gods in incarnated form. And, let's see, sort of minding incarnated reality for the rest of them. He is the one who's prophesized to be the one that's going to destroy humanity.
And the only one who actively enjoys what he does.
Enjoys what he does.
All the other elder gods, death is just collateral. They're not like trying to screw over humanity. It's like it's all part of their 4-dimensional chess game, or 5th-dimensional. While Nyarlathotep actually gets a kick out of causing mayhem and confusion.
Much more of a being that lives in the present. I mean, we talked about how this overwhelming part of the mythos is that they are not inherently evil or good. They are so beyond those concepts that it doesn't really apply to any of them.
They're a cosmic force that has always existed and will always exist further. Humanity just happens to live in the same time frame as them for this brief span of time.
They're about as far beyond us in terms of good and evil as we would be to amoeboids or ants on the ground.
Ant boot.
Exactly right. That's actually something from Straczynski again, where where Ambassador Jakar talks about how a cosmic being might pick up an ant, or like he might be the cosmic entity that picks up an ant, and then he puts it back, and the ant might go to another ant and go, "What was that?" And of course, the other ant can't tell him because we are unknowable to ants as well as those are unknowable to us.
Yep. I think that about wraps it up here. We've certainly spent enough time talking about the individuals. I do like the details on Hashtur over here. The king in yellow.
See, I'm wearing yellow glasses, so I'm not picking out the colors as well as I ought. Very almost androgynous in places. Underfed, gaunt, something like plague walking in form. And of course we've got the mask over top of him for the king in yellow here.
Yep. Got the pile of bones. So like a swirling eddy of air.
We are meant to have been mentioning how people can go to our website to see more photos of these to get really good close-up looks at them.
Yeah, this is just a sample of what comes in the Cthulhu Wars set by Peterson Games.
This is just an example of what our painters can do.
Yeah, we have examples of all sorts of painting styles and colors. It's not just this, not just what you see here.
This is more of an example of the bestial sort of things that our painters can do and assemble.
We were trying to go for I think they were going for more of a iconic look.
Yeah, I can certainly see the iconic bits in Hastur here. Definitely for Great Cthulhu here on the end. I've only seen the forms in black and white for the most part, but the fleshy horror really comes out, especially in this case of Yog Sothoth here.
Oh, absolutely. I love these boobous tumors. That's because buboes are a thing.
And this feels very much like the purple and pinks that you get with Slaneshi sort of demons in Warhammer.
And this feels very Tzeentch-like, fitting for his trickster nature.
Exactly right.
So with blues and purples and tentacles.
Anyway, that kind of wraps up our mini review for this. If you want to find out more about our abilities, please come to www.whitemetalgames.com. And of course, if you want to find out how we do these things so that you can do them yourself, certainly get into our premium content and subscribe. That way you can see all sorts of tutorials about the techniques that our painters employ and how they achieve results very much like what you're seeing here. Until then, my name's Edward.
My name's Hunter.
And until then, be safe, roll crits.